The story begins with Ellie Turner, also known as Ellie, dancing in her room. Ellie is a young woman with dreams of becoming a fashion designer. She lives with her grandmother, affectionately called Grand Peggy, and has been grieving the loss of her mother, who occasionally appears to her in mirrors. One day, Peggy shows Ellie a letter she received, informing Ellie that she has been accepted into a fashion school in London. Ellie is thrilled by the news, but Peggy cautions her about the dangers she might encounter in the city. Undeterred, Ellie takes a train to London and gets a ride to her new accommodation in a local taxi. However, the taxi driver makes unsettling comments, making Ellie uncomfortable. She decides to exit the taxi at a shop and waits for the driver to leave before continuing her journey to her room. Once there, she meets her roommate, Jocasta. Ellie goes out with Jocasta and her friends, during which it's revealed that Ellie's mother passed away by suicide after struggling with mental illness. In the ladies' room, Ellie overhears Jocasta gossiping about her to others. Feeling hurt, Ellie leaves the pub and walks back to her room, noticing an older man who appears to be watching her with a smirk. Later, Jocasta brings a guy to her room for a hookup while Ellie tries to sleep. Unable to find peace in her current living situation, Ellie ventures out and stumbles upon a party. The only person who befriends her is a young man named John. The following morning, Ellie wakes up late but manages to make it to class on time for attendance. Realizing that she needs a place of her own to find some peace, she discovers a room in a boarding house run by an elderly woman named Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins provides Ellie with a set of rules to follow and allows her to stay in an upstairs bedroom. Ellie finds solace in the quiet atmosphere and sleeps soundly under the covers. However, when Ellie wakes up, she finds herself transported back to the 1960s. She enters a venue called Café de Paris and sees her reflection as another young woman named Sandie. Ellie begins to follow Sandie as if she's an invisible observer. Sandie has aspirations of becoming a singer at the venue but faces unwanted attention from an unpleasant patron. She is advised to speak to a man named Jack about her singing dreams. Sandie eventually meets Jack, and she is charmed by him. Jack and Sandie plan to leave the venue together when a rude patron makes inappropriate comments. Jack defends Sandie by punching the guy in the face, and they escape together, sharing a passionate kiss in a phone booth. This scene is also reflected as happening with Ellie in her own world. As Ellie continues her journey, she unexpectedly finds Sandie in her own bed. When she tries to touch her, she suddenly wakes up back in the present. Inspired by what she witnessed in the past, Ellie decides to create a fashion design based on Sandie's outfit. Jocasta notices a hickey on Ellie's neck from Jack's earlier affectionate gestures towards Sandie. That night, Ellie hopes to return to the 1960s in her dreams. She indeed finds herself as Sandie, and Jack takes Sandie to meet the owner of another venue, the Rialto, so she can perform a song. The men at the venue recognize Sandie's talent. Back in the present, Ellie dyes her hair blonde to resemble Sandie and continues working on her dress design, which her teacher appreciates, while Jocasta mocks her out of spite. Ellie later spots the venue from the 1960s in the present day and decides to inquire about a job at a local pub. On her way back to her room, the old man she saw earlier follows her and mentions recognizing her because of her hair but insists he's not trying to pick her up. During another trip to the 1960s, Ellie discovers that Sandie's life has taken a dark turn. Jack has forced her into prostitution, and she struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. Sandie uses various aliases like Alex, Lexi, or Anna. Only one man treats her kindly, while the others take advantage of her. In one disturbing encounter, Ellie witnesses a lecherous man approaching Sandie, and she screams at him not to touch her. It appears that the man hears her, but Ellie suddenly wakes up. The traumatic experience leads Ellie to tear up the pink dress design she had originally drawn in class. Despite her secret excursions to the past, Ellie manages to balance her work and school life. During her next trip to the 1960s, Ellie observes Sandie becoming increasingly unhappy and jaded as she endures the hardships of prostitution and substance abuse. Sandie refers to herself negatively, and Ellie tries to communicate with her through the mirror. She breaks the glass and reaches out for Sandie but wakes up abruptly. John notices that Ellie looks unwell and invites her to a Halloween party to cheer her up. Jocasta and her friends offer them drinks, and they start dancing. However, Ellie experiences disturbing hallucinations of the men who mistreated Sandie, as well as Sandie dancing alone. John takes Ellie home, and they become intimate, but Ellie sees disturbing images in the ceiling mirror, including Jack attacking Sandie. Ellie screams at him to stop and appears to witness Jack fatally stabbing Sandie. Ms. Collins, the boarding house owner, hears the commotion and orders John to leave, as she has a rule against male visitors. She instructs Ellie to go to bed. The next day, Ellie apologizes to Ms. Collins but inquires about any deaths in the room. Ms. Collins avoids giving a direct answer. Later, Ellie goes to the library to research murders from the 1960s. She starts hallucinating ghostly figures following her, nearly leading her to harm Jocasta with a pair of scissors. John tries to explain things to Jocasta as Ellie leaves in a panic. Ellie rushes to the police station to report the murder, believing the old man is Jack and that he got away with killing Sandie. However, the detectives have little to go on from her account, and the old man seems to have another story, mentioning someone named Alex being responsible for Sandie's fate. Ellie chased after the man, but tragically, he was hit by a car and died on the street. Ellie's boss instructed someone to call for help, using the alias Lindsay, and claiming to be a former cop. In a startling twist, Ellie realized that the man wasn't Jack but the kind-hearted gentleman who hadn't taken advantage of her. Overwhelmed by recent events, Ellie decided to return to her countryside home to live with her grandmother. Ms. Collins kindly gave Ellie some tea and her mail. One letter was addressed to Ms. Collins, revealing her full name as Alexandra, the name Sandie had used as a short form. Ms. Collins unveiled a shocking truth: she was Sandie. After enduring a life filled with abuse, she allowed her identity as Sandie to die when she fatally stabbed Jack. She later sought revenge by taking the lives of all the men who had wronged her. Ms. Collins then admitted to poisoning Ellie's tea, intending to make it appear as a suicide. John came looking for Ellie, and despite her weakened state, she managed to warn John to run. Ms. Collins stabbed him while Ellie attempted to escape upstairs, witnessing a younger version of Sandie attacking her. A fire broke out downstairs and began spreading. Ellie locked herself in her room, where the spirits of Sandie's victims broke through the floors and walls, imploring Ellie to kill Ms. Collins. As Ellie finally broke in, she saw her reflection as Sandie and realized she had become as much of a monster as the men who had hurt her. In a desperate act, she tried to slit her throat, but Ellie stops her and tries to help her. Ms. Collins chooses to stay and die in the fire while letting Ellie go. Ellie managed to lead John to safety just as the medics arrived, and Ms. Collins, with unwavering resolve, allowed herself to be consumed by the flames. At a later time, Ellie proudly showcased her fashion designs in a thrilling fashion show. Peggy and John were there, enthusiastically cheering her on, alongside the rest of the excited audience. Her teacher, along with the other girls, congratulated her on her achievement. Once again, Ellie saw her mother's reflection in the mirror, radiating a proud and joyful smile. As Peggy and John approached to offer their congratulations, Ellie noticed Sandie's reflection in the mirror, waving at her from the past.